Hey guys, Matt here, and I am back here in Southern California, busily trying to take advantage of the limited amount of time I have before I disappear off into the civilization, or before I disappear off onto the trail again. So as I've mentioned at length, the big plan for this year, 2024, is the American Discovery Trail. Basically, since I've spent the last 4 years hiking across the United States like this 3 times and paddling once, I decided how better to celebrate having successfully completed the Triple Crown, but to hike across. So, American Discovery Trail is a roughly 4.5 to 5,000 mile trail that goes between Delaware and San Francisco. My plan is to start it basically at the end of March and, if at all possible, make it all the way across. Similar to the Florida Trail, there is actually a northern route and a southern route that are both officially parts of the trail. I am planning to take the southern route basically because it passes through Canyon City, which is where my parents are, and it kind of tickled my fancy to start hiking at the ocean and then just, walk past my parents and then continue on. So as far as the American Discovery Trail, there's 2 ways to do it. You can start in San Francisco and go to Delaware, or you can start in Delaware and go to San Francisco. My initial preference was to start in San Francisco. That is easier to get to, and then I would be hiking through the more familiar areas first, and then I'd be able to finish on the, less traveled, for me, East Coast. Downside of that, and the reason that I have now switched to starting in Delaware, is you got to get across the Sierra Nevada. Depending on the year, springtime in the Sierra Nevada can be very difficult. I own crampons, ice axes. I have training in snow travel, but I do not like doing snow travel and distance. It just doesn't go together real well for me. You have to carry way more gear, and my knees can't hold up to skis. So when I initially looked at it, there are some people who have managed to make it across starting around Memorial Day. That's a lot later than I want to start. I'm done, like I said, at the end of March, and so the thing that makes the most sense for me is to get out on trail and start. While starting on the East Coast, I may hit some cold weather, snow, storms, etc. It's generally doable. You're talking inches of snow versus feet of snow. I looked at the route. It goes up near Tahoe. It's about maybe 2 weeks in where you actually go up and over, and then you end up descending down around Reno. And I just don't have a lot of confidence in that being doable early season. It depends on the year. Last year was a crazy year with just snow all over the place. We had to cancel snow camp up in the Sierra for our students because there was just too much snow and rain damage and everything. This year now, we're currently at about 23% of the average snowpack. So if the current trend continues, maybe it would be doable in, April timeframe, as I would be trying to cross maybe mid-April, but I'm not real confident in that. So instead, if I start in Delaware, the East Coast is doable. I'll go through Washington, D.C., through Harper's Ferry, et cetera, et cetera. I don't get into real mountains and hills for over 2,000 miles. Basically, once I get into Colorado and I rejoin the CDT, it's going to be flatter, more urban, little East Coast hills, things like that. That's a lot easier to manage when you're talking about, spring weather. That does mean that the big challenge is going to be, do I make it over the Sierra at the end of the season instead of the start? And basically what I've come to, I really prefer going monument to monument. I don't like multi-year hikes. It still kind of sticks in my craw that I had to do the CDT over multiple years, but first world problems, right? My trip of a lifetime took 2 years instead of 1. Aw. If I can move well, meaning, 20 plus mile days sustained, which I think I should be able to, as long as I don't have, challenges. When do I ever have challenges? I think I can make it over. Fall in the Sierra is usually a little more forgiving than springtime, just because we'll often get like the first snow up high and then it'll melt out. So even if we get a dusting and it's a couple of inches, it's usually not, avalanche danger, all those things you got to deal with in spring, deep snow. So we'll see. I'm basically going to make best time aiming for it. And if I can, if it is at all possible, I will go over the Sierra, finish at San Francisco. Now, if for some reason I cannot, basically meaning there is too much snow, I'm too slow. If it's December again, I'm not making it across the Sierra, probably. My plan will be to get as far as I can, whatever makes sense, And then the following summer, 2025, there will be a spring trip, something along the lines of the Grand Enchantment, Arizona Trail, something like that. Then Jen and I are going to be doing a Source to Sea on the Yukon, and that will be beginning of June until sometime in August when Jen's summer is over. And once Jen goes back to school, then I'll come back. And if I haven't finished the American Discovery Trail, my plan will be to finish up however many of the Western states I still have, and hopefully have that completely done. So then I can focus on the next big hiking goal, which will probably be the North Country Trail. So if you've never heard of the American Discovery Trail, it is basically something kind of similar to the Eastern Continental Trail in that it is a route that is made up of other like sub-trails, road walks, things like that. One of the most common things I get when people hear that I'm doing the ADT is like, oh, that's all road walking. No, I would never do that. These were some stats I was given by the ADT organization. As you can see, there is a lot of miles on pavement. However, there are trails, there are dirt roads, there are bike trails. One thing I found interesting was here is a breakdown by state for percentage of trail versus percentage of road. And believe me, I'm not the biggest fan of road walks. I will do them, but I also look at things I've done. Like, for example, when I did the Eastern Continental Trail, almost everything once I crossed into Canada was a road walk of one type or another, but it was also really, really memorable and something I really enjoyed. So that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, any trail off of the big three is going to have significant roadwalks. The big three even have some roadwalks here and there. It's just the reality because we don't have unbroken wilderness in this country. Now, because this is a route and because this is so seldom done, there's only been a handful of people who have done the entire thing. Most of them took multiple years. Maps are a little harder to come by. You get spoiled doing something like the big three trails because you can just download Far Out. You've got everything you need. You know, literally, once you've bought and downloaded Far Out, you can just start hiking and basically do all your planning and everything on the go. Here, I've got to make my maps externally. So I'm using GPS tracks. The trick here is there are actually two different sets of GPS data for the American Discovery Trail. One is the actual American Discovery Trail organization themselves. You have to pay about $100 and you get the entire set. It comes with GPXs for each state and also turn-by-turn style directions if you use those. Those were actually kind of cool because they do say whether you're on dirt or you're on pavement. I actually thought that could be useful, so I did buy that data set. But there is another website out there that is unofficial, not affiliated with the American Discovery Organization, called Hiking America. They have a map set for about $70 that you can buy. It is hosted on Gaia GPS, so it is kind of drop-in. You pay the money, you get added to a folder, and it'll just appear on your phone in Gaia. In addition to having routes, you know, the blue line, red line tracks, it also has points of interest, meaning it marks things like water sources, campsites people have used. It has kind of that user generated points of interest along the trail. That's useful. When I originally started considering the American Discovery Trail, it was when I ran across somebody doing the trail in Colorado when I was on the CDT. They were using the Hiking America data and they swore by that. So my plan is I'm actually building my own maps out of both. So I'm taking the American Discovery Trail data, I'm taking the Hiking America data, I'm going to merge it into one set, and then I can make decisions as I go. And that's important because people are always asking me like, oh, how do you plan for these? You must spend a lot of time planning and have like everything. I spend less time planning than you would think. Because the reality is, once you get out on trail, it's, you know, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Plans are out the window like the second day, so why even make them? So what I do is I make sure everything's feasible, meaning, you know, it's walkable, the food carries aren't too long, things like that. And then I just make sure I have as much time as possible, and the rest of it, I generally plan on the go. I will, on a normal trail, make a resupply plan, and by that, I mean I list all the towns that are usually accessible. For example, this is the spreadsheet I made for the CDT this past season in Colorado and New Mexico. I basically listed all of the commonly accessed towns, what mile marker they were accessed from, and that let me play around with how many miles each food carry was. In general, I'm looking for food carries that are somewhere in the sweet spot of 50 to 100 miles, usually leaning a little towards longer carries. And then if plans change, like last year on the CDT, I ended up not wanting to do as heavy a food carry because I was having massive water carries. So I went into reserve, and I already had it on my sheet, and it's like, okay, so I can just insert this and go. Well, with the American Discovery Trail, particularly on the East Coast, I'm going through a ton of these little towns. It really doesn't make sense to go through and list every little town along the route because there's too many of them. And almost every little town has a Dollar General. They've basically taken over everything on the East Coast. So that means I can resupply pretty much whenever I want to. My general plan here is I'm going to start out probably with about 3 days of food. That gives me some flexibility, and I like having a few days without having to worry about stopping and buying things. Mostly so I can get a little better food versus, okay, I'm just stopping in gas stations and eating junk food every day. So I'll start with 3 days. I'll go. If I can get into a Walmart, that is my general preference because they have things like those instant refried beans that I use, or a grocery store. If I can't, I can also go into Dollar General. I can resupply at gas stations. The trick for me is usually dinners. I can do breakfast easy because you can always get peanut butter, but if everything else fails, I have to fall back on like Northsides or ramen for dinner, and I've burned out on those. So I'll actually end up carrying more meals just so I can do like beans and rice and things like that. So I'll start out 3 days of food. After about 2 days, I'll start looking on my phone. Google Maps works wonders, and just find whatever's closest to trail, resupply, and just keep chaining that together. I'm not going to prep any of that ahead of time because, quite frankly, I don't know how many miles a day I'm going to do. My general estimate is going to be around 20. Generally, if I'm on flat, good trail or, pavement, I can make more than that. But 20 is a pretty good like round number just as far as trying to get rough napkin math for when I'm going to be at this state, that state, etc. The hardest part is I can get a rough estimate of how many miles I hike or how fast I hike. I generally go somewhere between 2.5 and 4 miles an hour depending on things. But if my feet start giving me issues, if the weather's bad, if other things delay me, like let's say the worst is when I find somebody to talk to, because that will cost me hours at a time going through towns. So the food carries I can be flexible on. Camping, it's a crapshoot. I've looked at the map data I have access to, and there are some stealth camps that people have been able to manage. You get into a green belt where you can like get into the bushes and not leave any trash. Nobody knows where you are, things like that. You arrive late, you leave early. I'm used to doing that. That's not a problem. The reality, though, is I'm probably going to have to lean heavier on hotels than I would on a normal trail, just because if you're in the middle of civilization, I'm not going to go try and stay in a park or something like that and risk getting rousted or freaking out the locals. So my general plan is going to be, start hiking at whatever, wake up, do my videos, drink my coffee, start hiking, hike until around dark, and aim to, by the time the sun's down, get into a hotel or at least have a plan for where I think I'm going to camp. As far as stealth camps, when I'm looking at those, generally I'm just going for wherever I am, and I'm looking ahead on Google Maps because the satellite view will give you an idea. Oh, okay, there's a bunch of trees here, there's a bunch of vegetation, there's no houses around, maybe this would work. Good news is, for a good long while since I'm coming out of the East Coast, I'm going to have the ability to get Ubers or, walk into hotels, motels. So I'll probably end up spending a little more time or a little more money on those, but is what it is. The Mississippi was actually really cheap for us because we spent less time in hotels because we had to deal with the boat. So this will kind of balance out that, I guess. As far as my general plan, like I said, end of March is when I'm aiming to get out to Delaware. As soon as the class finishes, I'm going to drive to Colorado, drop my Jeep off with my parents, and then I'm going to get a rental car to drive out to Delaware. Doing that for 2 reasons instead of flying. One is, anytime you turn anything over to the airlines, you're risking damage, and especially with lighter weight gear, I don't like doing that. The other is, I haven't driven that side of the country. I have driven the West Coast to like Colorado so many times. I've just been back and forth. The only time I've driven east of there really has been Louisiana. So I figured this might be a good opportunity, and it'll just give me more flexibility. And that way I can do my resupply and everything and get things like canisters you can't bring on an airplane, can't do knives and carry-on, stuff like that. I won't have to worry about that. I'll be all ready to go. So once I leave Colorado, I'll have 2.5 days, I think, to get to Delaware, drop off the car, take a Uber over to the trailhead, and then start walking. I see people who will like go to do the AT and then spend multiple nights in the lodge before leaving. That's really not me. To my thinking, if I'm going and I'm going to be out there for months, why not just get started and, save the expensive hotel time? Even if I just get 10 miles down the trail, that's still 10 miles down the trail. So my plan will basically be to drop in, start walking, and see how far I get. While I will be starting alone, Jen is actually going to be joining me for her spring break after just a couple of days. So she's going to fly in. We're working with some local trail angels to see about getting her to me, and then we'll be together for about a week. So she should be with me going through Washington, D.C. If everything goes real well, we may make it as far as Harper's Ferry. That would make it a little easier to get to the airport for her to fly back. She then comes back to Southern California, finishes out her school year, and I continue solo. Once she is done with school in early June, then she flies out, meets me wherever I am, and then we'll be together for the entire summer, our usual, Massateter adventure until August. I don't know where exactly I'm going to be when she joins me. Obviously, there's a lot that can happen between now and June. My guess is probably somewhere in Kansas. I keep poking fun at her, just saying it's completely flat and corn everywhere. She's going to love it. But we'll see. She is hoping that I do better than kind of my napkin math plan and make it into Colorado. Then she can kind of see some of the prettier areas and see the overlap with the CDT. And that would be great. I'm going to make as good a time as I can, but I've been around the block enough and I have enough complications, okay-ish through hiker. I don't like to assume that, oh yeah, I'm going to do like 25, 30 mile days. Yeah. And then of course, once late August rolls around, it's time for her to go back to school. Same thing. She flies out, goes back to Southern California, and I am on my own for the remainder. Hopefully the remainder will be wherever she leaves me until San Francisco. Otherwise, it'll probably be, Reno right before the Sierra is my other guess. If it's just too late to do a Sierra crossing, we'll see. If I make it all the way to San Francisco, that'll be ideal because it is really easy to get from San Francisco back down to LA by a train. So that would make an easy dismount. Now I get asked a lot, oh, I have friends or I'm in this area. When are you going to be in this area? The reality is, I don't know. I have a napkin math sheet, so I put everything into spreadsheets to track. And I have taken the mileage for each state, applied 20 miles a day, so I have kind of a rough napkin math for when I think I'm going to be to Utah or here or there. But the reality is that's barely worth the, it's not printed, the pixels it's displayed in. So anytime somebody asks me that, oh, hey, I'd love to come meet you in this area. When are you going to be here? I give them the usual warning of I could be here weeks earlier, weeks later, I don't know. But this is what I am basically working off at this point. Gear-wise, I'm not planning on making a lot of changes here. I've got my gear I've used for the last 4 years. It served me pretty well. My dear hope is that I'm going to be able to get away with my 30-degree sleeping bag instead of my 10-degree sleeping bag. Both of them are light, but the 10 degrees just bulky enough to bother me. We'll see. I may have to start with the warmer bag depending what temperatures are like. Other than that, the kit that I have is pretty flexible and good for pretty much everything. And the changes which I might make, like if I'm in extended rain, I may go for an umbrella or something. Honestly, I can pick that up on the road. The biggest thing I've actually been trying to work on is my electronics because my batteries, those Nitecore batteries, I finally gave up on. So I've been kind of playing around with different plugs and battery packs, trying to find one that's maybe a little more compact than the one I got as a last minute replacement on the CDT. And then more importantly, the thing that I require absolutely before I set foot on this trail is I need to figure out better headphones. I need something with noise cancellation. I know that people will freak out hearing that online. Oh no, you don't want noise cancellation. You're gonna get run over and eaten by mountain lions, maybe at the same time. Respectfully, I disagree. I've done a lot of hiking. Listening to headphones, you still hear rattlesnakes over them, things like that. What I'm basically looking for is something I can carry with me where I can listen to my audiobooks and not have it drowned out by traffic. My dislike of loud vehicles has reached a epic proportion the last couple of years because my ears just are getting blown out for hours and hours and hours as I'm walking along some road. And a lot of times I'm off in the shoulder. There is no way I'm going to get hit, or I'm facing traffic. So I'm not worried about someone sneaking up behind me and just me hearing something to jump out of the way. But not being able to listen to my audiobooks while I'm doing a 20-mile walk down some like straight road in the middle of nowhere has been driving me nuts. At the moment, quite frankly, I am going to stick with my wired USB-C Apple headphones, and then I'm probably just bringing AirPods unless I can find something else, because so far everything I have tested as far as trying to find, in-ear, not over-ear, giant bulky headphones that I can use while hiking has not had near as good noise cancellation. I have some like Anker Soundcore and a couple others, and I'm tired of just throwing money at these, $75 headphones that don't work. What I really wish is that I could find wired USB-C earbuds that also had noise cancellation, but those just don't seem to exist. You got to go Bluetooth, and once you go Bluetooth, you're talking, they have really expensive ones with noise cancellation. They have really cheap ones that have basically no noise cancellation. And neither of those are really working for me. So I'm probably going with what I have, which is the AirPods, unless I find something. The one other solution that somebody suggested, which I actually found interesting, was to take the inductive headphones, like the Aftershocks, which I do have some that I've used for paddling, and then put earplugs in. And per at least one guy, he was able to mow the lawn, and that kept out enough sound to make it work. I could do that. I don't really like having earplugs in just because I have really bad tinnitus. It's genetic. It's not from listening to music or anything. But anytime I plug my ears, it basically leaves me with this really painful sound reverbing around. And so I don't like to have them in if I can avoid it at all. I'd rather have something that the active noise cancellation is just a little more comfortable for me. Beyond that, the only other real big thing that I'm replacing, other than, like new shirts, things like that, is I'm going to buy another ULA Catalyst Ultra Pack. My Ultra Pack has been getting some wear, and the inside has delaminated to the point where I was kind of looking at other solutions. Overall, really happy with the Ultra material. I'm just using it a lot. I'm harder on things than most people. The big reason why I actually sprang for getting another pack is I've had multiple people tell me that I was probably sized incorrectly on that pack, and I should have a medium instead of a small. I tend to get some weird shoulder pain after a couple of thousand miles out on a trail, and I'm kind of hopeful that maybe the bigger torso will prevent that. It's worth trying. And then, of course, I am trying to find alternatives for the Ultras, which have been my go-to hiking shoes for the last couple of years, because while the Ultras work better than anything else for me, they also fall apart after about 250 miles or so, and that's getting really expensive. So I'm doing some hikes while I'm in town. I'm trying out some Brooks Cascadias, some Topos, some New Balances, and a few other things. Just hopefully trying to find something that can hold together for, 400 or 500 miles, dependably. And yes, I know, Ultra is reissuing the Lone Peak as the Lone Peak 8, and they're saying they're more durable, but yeah, I've heard that before. The last durable shoe they had was like the 3.5. Ever since then, everything's just been crap. So yeah, that's basically where things stand. At the moment, I have about 2.5 more months until it's drop everything and run for Delaware. And that feels like a very short amount of time with the amount of stuff I'm trying to get done. I have to do like all my dentist appointment, doctor's appointment, things like that, all the gear swaps now because I'm not accessible for the rest of the year. So I'm really enjoying the time in town with Taters, but I'm really excited for this. I loved the things like the Grand Enchantment Trail, where it's a trail that there's not as many people on. This is scratching that itch. I loved the Eastern Continental Trail, where it was look at a globe and I'm going from here to here. I love hiking through areas where people aren't expecting through hikers and just getting to kind of meet people who are just blown away or excited to hear what I'm doing. The ECT was a rough trail for me, but it has been one of the most memorable things I've done. So this is kind of shades of that for me. So really looking forward to it. I'm sure it will be a complete and utter disaster with all sorts of complications and God knows what. I keep joking to Jen that Kansas is going to be so great. It's going to be flat, cornfields, tornadoes tearing all over the place. But hey, one day at a time, right?